Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Football House. I'm Sam Basil coming at you pre-recorded for week 4 of the 2025 college football season. It's going to be a great slate, and through these first 3 weeks, the season has been incredible, but from a betting perspective, the Football House crew has not had too great of a time. In week 3, we went a combined 14, 17, and 1, making our season standings not the prettiest as of September 20th. Cole Hughes sitting at the top at 12 and 12. Tondo and I just behind him at 10 and 12. And Jake, he's sitting at the bottom at 9, 13, and 1. But he's got one thing to hang his hat on, and that's that he got the first push of the season last week. But I think week 4 is a great place for us to right the ship. We've got a fantastic game of the week in Utah versus Texas Tech, and we're going to start off with Will Tondo's card. He's got a big spread starting off with Purdue plus 25.5 versus Notre Dame, but he's got the Irish taking that with the Notre Dame money line. Then he's got Tulane plus 10.5 versus Ole Miss, Miami minus 7.5 versus the Florida Gators, USC versus Michigan State, a fantastic Big Ten matchup. Some are calling this one the Trojan War. He's got that one at the over at 56.5. Michigan moneyline versus Nebraska, another key Big Ten matchup if the Wolverines want to survive in this conference this year. And then heading over to the SEC, taking on a MAC school, he's got Mississippi State minus 21.5 versus Northern Illinois. Then he finishes with Indiana versus Illinois, and he's got the over at 52.5. His FCS lock of the week, he's sticking with his alma mater, the Bulldogs, Bryant moneyline versus Campbell. His FBS lock of the week, Oregon minus 35.5 versus Oregon State. And then his game of the week, we'll get into it a little bit later on my thoughts, but he's got the Utes taking down Texas Tech, and he's got them straight up. Up next, we've got Jake Zimmer's card, and without further ado, I'll let Jake take it over.
Coming at you live from Vancouver, Canada. Where other than Tim Hortons, baby. Got myself a nice loaded breakfast sandwich. All right, here's the card, boys. Live from Canada. Oklahoma minus 7 versus Auburn. Mizzou minus 9 versus South Carolina. Illinois plus 6.5. Love that one versus Indiana on the road. And then the big ones. Texas minus 39 over Sam Houston State. And Louisville minus 25 over Bowling Green. Then I got the under in Rutgers, Iowa. 45.5. Seems too much. That is parlaying into my lock. Not an actual parlay, but Rutgers plus 2.5 over Iowa. Love them to potentially win this game. FCS, Grambling State, baby. Money line over East Texas A&M. Game of the week. I got the Utes, man. I think Utah's legit this year. Gonna enjoy the rest of my Timmy Hose. Enjoy, boys.
All right, a great card from Jake as he looks to right the ship and get even on the season. Oklahoma minus 7 versus Auburn is a pick I really like. I'll get into why in a little bit later. But, it's really funny how in week 4 we've still got these massive spreads. Texas minus 30, Louisville minus 25. And, for a guy like Jake who's just trying to get even on the season, it's kind of the opportune moment to take advantage of these massive spreads. Up next, we've got one of House Enterprises college football aficionados breaking down his picks. Cole Hughes, please take it away.
Going to send in our picks this week because we are unable to do a pod, which is unfortunate. We had a great week of college football last week. A lot of exciting games, a lot to talk about this week, but we'll be back next week. As for this week, the picks, I'm going to start out with my FBS lock of the week. That's going to be Miami minus 7.5 over Florida. Look, Florida's 2-8 in the last 10 matchups against Miami. Miami's been rolling. They're averaging 486 yards per game on offense. They're 3-0 at home this year. They've won their last 9 at home dating back to November of 2023. And over that time span, they've beaten opponents at home by roughly 30 points on average, 29.6 over that home win streak. So I like the Hurricanes here. Lagway for Florida, their quarterback, didn't look too great last week, threw 5 picks. It was only a 10-point game against LSU, but, I think that he's got a long way to go, and, he's going to have to play better. So taking Miami there in that game. My FCS lock of the week is going to be Tarleton State versus Chattanooga. Tarleton State, they've been really impressive, fun to watch. Right now they're ranked 3rd in the entire country for all of FCS. They had that big win against Army a couple weeks ago in overtime, and they've been rolling since. They're outscoring FCS opponents this year 157-13. Their quarterback, Victor Gabalis, he's thrown for 776 yards and 11 touchdowns with no picks. So, he's been really good. The defense has also been very good. They've caused 14 turnovers. The offense hasn't turned over the ball once. So I like Tarleton State to win money line against Chattanooga. For my regular picks, we're going to go Maryland plus 10.5 versus Wisconsin. I really like how Malik Washington, Maryland's quarterback, has played thus far this year. They're on the defensive side. Maryland looks good. They're second in all of the land in red zone defense, so they're not letting up a lot of points when teams get into the red zone, which is great. They got a lot of great defensive players on that side of the ball, whether it's freshman Sidney Stewart. He's got on the D-line, top 10 tackles for loss in the country. Their junior linebacker, Daniel Wingate, he's got 28 total tackles already on the year. And then you got sophomore defensive back, Lakari Rowland, who's got 2 picks. So a lot of defensive players there for Maryland. They were 1-8 in the Big Ten last year. They've looked to get good against non-conference opponents to start. So this is going to be a big test for them. I think Wisconsin's also trying to prove something. Luke Fickell, he's going into his 3rd year at Wisconsin as the head coach. He's got a 15-14 overall record. So, they got to pick it up or he's going to be out of a job. I think it's a close game in Camp Randall this week, but I think Maryland keeps it close. So I'm going to take the Terps in that one. I got UNLV minus 2.5 versus Miami, Ohio. I like UNLV here. I think they're getting better every week and building upon what they've been doing. They're being efficient on offense. They're 5th in the nation for completion percentage. Their quarterback, Anthony Colandrea, has played really well. He's been consistent. The Miami quarterback, DeQuan Finn, he struggled, so he's thrown 3 picks this far. He has no touchdowns. Their offense has been struggling. So UNLV on offense, they've averaged 429 yards per game, so I think they have the ability to put points up, and Miami's just not going to be able to catch up. So I'm taking the Rebels in that one. Oklahoma, Auburn, over 45.5. Look, Auburn's averaging 37 points per game. Oklahoma's averaging 35.7. Oklahoma has a turnover ratio right now of -5. They've been turning over the ball quite a bit, so that gives the opportunity for the Auburn Tigers to get some points. But at the same time, Oklahoma's defense has been strong. They're the 4th-ranked defense in the country. Auburn's running the ball well. They're averaging about 242 yards per game. The real question is going to be, can Oklahoma contain Auburn's running back, Jeremiah Cobb, on the ground? I think Cam Coleman, receiver for Auburn, he's also due for a big game. Last year, his last 3 games, he had 6 touchdowns. He has 1 this year, and he hasn't broken the 100-yard mark yet. So I expect Jackson Arnold to get the ball to Cam Coleman and have a big game. And talking about Jackson Arnold, this is a great quarterback matchup between these 2 guys, Jackson Arnold for Auburn and then John Mateer at Oklahoma. Both have shown that they're dual threat quarterbacks, that they can drive down the field quickly and score points, lead their offenses. So, we all know Arnold was on the Sooners the last couple years. I think he's going to want to return to Norman and make a point that, they shouldn't have gotten rid of him. And, he could have been the guy there or whatever it may be. And on the flip side, John Mateer is going to want to prove a point that, they made the right decision and by bringing him in. So, I expect that to be a good game, a lot of points, fun to watch. So hopefully they'll hit the over a 40.5 there. Illinois and Indiana, another great game in the Big Ten that I'm excited to watch. The last 2 weeks, Indiana has put up a ton of points, but they've been against Kennesaw State and Indiana State, so they haven't really been tested. Illinois had a big win over Duke a few weeks ago, as we saw. But, now is their time to make a statement. If you're Indiana, this is kind of a must-win game. They still have to play Iowa, Oregon, Penn State, all on the road later this year in their Big Ten conference. So those are tough matchups. Look, this game is always close. Two rivals. The last two matchups have been decided by 3 points. 2023, Illinois won 48-45. In the year prior, Indiana won 23-20. I think both defenses are solid in this game. They can both force turnovers. Illinois has a turnover margin of +6. Indiana's +4. So, and both quarterbacks are great for these two schools too. You got Fernando Mendoza out of Indiana. You got Luke Altmaier out of Illinois. Two great coaches in Kurt Signetti and Brett Bielema. So it's going to be a tight one. I think it's going to be close. I think even though it's in Indiana, Illinois keeps it close. They're 3-0 against the spread this year. So I'm going to take them in a dogfight to keep it close against the Hoosiers. Nebraska versus Michigan. This is another great game in the Big Ten. Two great quarterbacks again. This seems to be a theme this week. You got Dylan Raiola versus Bryce Underwood. Raiola's looked amazing. He's played really well this year. And Matt Rule, I think, is the key in this one, right? Matt Rule, we know his history. He was at Temple. He was at Baylor. Now he's at Nebraska. In his third year at Temple, he got them to 10 wins. In his third year at Baylor, he got them to 11 wins. The writing's on the wall. I think something with the third year and Matt Rule, I think Nebraska is going to have a good year this year. They're the top 10 in offense right now. They're ranked 10th, and their defense is also 6th in the country. So, I like Nebraska to beat Michigan here just because, they're at home at Memorial Stadium. Michigan's without their head coach, Sharon Moore. And that might not have had an impact too much when they played Central Michigan last week, but it's going to make a huge difference this week against a Nebraska team. And this isn't the same type of Michigan teams that we've seen in the past, national championship, where they can get over that disadvantage of not having their head coach on the sideline. But I think it's just going to be too much for them this year. I think the Husker prayers answered this week. I think the Cornhuskers get a huge win to enter the top 25 and become a contender in the Big Ten early on in the year. Virginia and Stanford got the over in that game as well. Virginia averaging 44.7 yards a game, 8th in the country in yards per game with 556 on average per game. That's a ton. 12th in offensive touchdowns. So they've been moving the ball well. If they're averaging over 40 points a game, I think Stanford can come up with a couple more points, and this game hits the over there. BYU -6.5 versus the ECU Pirates. BYU's coming off a bye week, so they're going to be well rested. Running back LJ Martin, he's had a great year for the Cougars this year. He already has 2 100-yard games on the ground. I think he continues that. Runs all over ECU. And look, BYU's got the number 1 defense in the country right now, so I think it's going to be hard for the Pirates to score. I'll take the Cougars 6.5. Game of the week, Utah versus Texas Tech. This is going to be an awesome one in the Big 12. I think it's going to be a toss-up. I like Utah because they're at home. I think it's going to be a really close game, so I'm just taking them money line. Look, Texas Tech has had a great offense this year. They've been crushing it. They're one of the best offenses in the country. Baron Morton, their quarterback, has led them, and they've been a juggernaut. But, I think Utah, their defense, man, they've returned a lot of starters from last year. There's a lot of continuity there. Even though that Texas Tech had a great transfer class come in, I think they were number 2 in the transfer portal rankings this offseason. They've made a lot of great changes. Joey McGuire has been doing well with that program. I just think that Kyle Whittingham and Utah, they have more experience. The defensive side, like I said, has played together, and I think they're going to do a good job, and their offense is more than capable of keeping up with Texas Tech. So, I think it's a close one, but I'm going to take the Utes over the Red Raiders there. Those are my picks for this week. We'll see you guys next week, and have fun this weekend watching some football. Thanks, guys.
A fantastic card, Cole, but I'm a little confused considering you're one of the biggest Notre Dame fans I know, and you're wearing an Alabama shirt? I mean, I guess if you lose to Alabama 2 times in the postseason in a 15-year span, I guess you got to start repping their merch. But no, great card. Love the UNLV pick. Love the Oklahoma versus Auburn over. And Illinois versus Indiana could be a very underrated Big Ten matchup this season. We'll see how that kind of affects the Big Ten standings later on this year. Finally, we've got my card, and I'm starting off also with Oklahoma, but I've got them -6.5 over Auburn. Look, long story short, John Mateer is a dog, averaging just under 315 pass yards a game for the Sooners. Good luck to the Tigers in trying to stop that. Next, I've got Tulane plus 11.5 versus Ole Miss. Look, Green Wave have been iffy against the spread, but I still like them as a serious group of 5 college football playoff contender. And, they beat Southern Alabama. They beat Duke. Ole Miss, a tough matchup. If they can keep it within single digits, I think it still looks good for their resume. They just got to avoid the penalties, establish their own pass game early, and continue their streak of really giving opposing quarterbacks a lot of hell. We really want to see a Javion White pick. He's got 3 picks so far this season. Let's see if that streak continues. Michigan, -2.5. Cole, you put it great yourself. Great matchup between Dylan Raiola, Bryce Underwood. I think Underwood is the guy that comes out on top in this one. I've also got USC -19.5 over Michigan State for my FBS lock of the week. And then rounding out my regular picks, I've got Georgia Tech -24.5 versus Temple. Look, I went against Haynes King last week. I'm never doing it again. Haynes King, this is my formal apology for underestimating your ability to recover from an injury quickly. Like I just said, USC -19.5 is my FBS lock of the week. I think, look, this is a crowded Big Ten this year, and a 20-point win for USC could be a great way for them to kind of really get in the mix here. My FCS lock of the week, Georgetown moneyline versus Brown. Georgetown looking to make some waves in the Patriot League this year. Ivy League teams are just getting their start, so they might be on some shaky legs, heading into week 4. So I've got the Hoyas. And then my game of the week, I'm going with Utah over Texas Tech. Look, this is a pivotal matchup for both teams in their respective Big 12 campaigns. One thing that Utah has to do is stop Behren Morton. He's a guy that likes to get down the field quick, likes to get points on the board quick. So if Utah can slow down the pace of this game and, get through the Red Raiders' really tough run defense, establish the ground game super early, then I think they'll take this one and they'll win it straight up. So give me the Utes money line. And guys, that's our show for week 4. Really great stuff coming up on the house. We've got plenty more college football action for you. So make sure you stick and keep following all the socials that you see below. We've got some great NFL coverage. Jordan Lauby and I are continuing our weekly breakdowns on the Basil Pod. So again, follow these socials so you can see everything that's coming up. But for Will Tondo, Jake Zimmer, and Cole Hughes, this has been the Football House Show Week 4 pre-record. I'm Sam Basil, and we'll see you guys next time.